Hi guys, welcome back to This Is What I Do with me, Tsidi Zanda. We're on episode 9, and I personally want to thank everyone who's just taken the time to watch the few episodes we've had. I've gotten a lot of feedback from some of you, and I'm so grateful. Thank you. Please continue to show love and hit that subscribe buttons. Let's get the numbers in and start having guests that some of you are recommending. Today's guest is a very we've got a bit of history. I've known her for a bit now. For a long time actually. Phumza Macanda, who is a big somebody in the journalism, and a journalism space, and she's also a communications practitioner. Pumza, thank you for saying yes, and welcome to This Is What I Do.
Thank you.
Unjani, how have you been?
Ndiyaphila, I'm good. And let me just first congratulate you on your podcast. I didn't know about it.
Thank you.
Until you contacted me, and of course I was not gonna say no.
Yes, thank you.
But I have been keeping very well since we worked together a long time ago.
The last time I saw you was probably in 2011.
Yeah, that sounds right. That sounds very right.
In 2011.
Yeah, 2011, 2013 maybe.
Yeah, that was a long time
2013
ago.
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Personally, I think you have such an impressive resume.
Oh, thank you.
And some people, when someone says it out loud and they read out all the stuff that you've managed to achieve, how does it feel when you hear it out loud? Do you feel like you've achieved something when people now invite you to come and sit and speak like this?
I wouldn't say I think I've achieved, because one always feels that there is that next level that they can get to. But I do feel like I've had an amazing career.
Yeah.
I do feel like I've had very, very exciting experiences in my career. I think my career is grounded in journalism.
Yes.
And as a journalist who worked for a company called Reuters, Reuters is a wire service. And generally, if you work for Reuters, you are reporting for the investment community, the global investment community. So I was stationed in Johannesburg. And I was reporting economics, monetary policy, fiscal policy for people that are interested in investing in South Africa, that are, say, based in New York or based in London.
Okay, nice.
People that are interested in this country. And those were the heydays of South Africa.
The peak of journalism.
The peak of journalism, but also the peak of South Africa when we were talking about the rising black middle class, when we were talking about 5% growth, GDP growth for South Africa, and it was not a pipe dream, when we were preparing to host the World Cup. And in those days, and that was, I did exciting things. I went to China. I started traveling a lot internationally. I started traveling in Africa a lot, because when I was based in South Africa reporting for Reuters, my job was not just South Africa focused, but it was Southern Africa focused. So I got to do a lot of things relating to the region: Botswana, Zimbabwe, Malawi, Zambia, and that. So I liked that exposure.
Yeah.
So very exciting experience.
Just off what you just said now, you obviously are going to find yourself in very big rooms, very powerful rooms, where that thing called imposter syndrome creeps in.
Oh my goodness.
Does it happen to you? And how do you quickly say, Pumza, stop it, you belong here?
Oh my goodness, it does. It does.
It's a thing, eh?
Even to this day, but way back in the day, I was a young journalist. I would like, the thing about it was that I started reporting, you're listening to me talking about economics.
Yes.
I actually didn't do economics at varsity. I did journalism. I was a humanities student. I did journalism and politics.
Yes.
And I did drama as well. That was nice. But when I started writing, for instance, about currencies, about bond markets, about the finance minister's budget, and about monetary policy, I felt like I was I was out of my depth. And of course, that is going to engender a sense of imposter syndrome. And I did do a course in economics at VETS, which helped a lot.
Yeah.
But you do find yourself in spaces where you feel that everybody else is better than you. Everybody else has
But
got
it's
it
not like you
figured
were
out.
there for the economics, but it does help.
It did
to
help.
have-
It did
yeah.
help. But you do find, and also there was it was a lot of male-dominated fields.
Yes.
So you find yourself feeling a certain kind of way about a whole lot of things that you wish you were, that you aren't. But confronting it
Yeah.
is a journey. I think you always feel that you've got to be better. You've got to be
Yeah.
better. But yeah, it's a real thing.
It is.
It's a real thing.
It is. You did journalism
Mm-hmm.
at the very famous School of Journalism. South Africans and this school, Rhodes University,
Yeah.
produces one of the best.
Yeah, it is.
What do you think is the secret sauce? I mean, most of the people that I know of that did journalism at Rhodes have gone to do big things.
Amazing
you know?
things.
What do you think is the secret sauce? Is there a secret sauce with Rhodes journalism specifically, especially people from like 90s have gone to become very influential people? What do you think it is about Rhodes and journalism?
I think at the time when I went to varsity, Rhodes University was the only university that offered a journalism degree.
Only.
It was the only. You could only find journalism at a technicon.
Oh,
we
okay.
call them technicons in those
Yes,
days.
yes.
So Rhodes University was the only varsity that offered journalism at the time. And what I liked about it as well, it was a very small university. It remains so even today. And I think the best of the best in terms of journalism came, and communications in general came from Rhodes. So I think ngesiXhosa kuthiwa sayincanca
Ebele.
sayincanca ebeleni,
Yes.
you know.
But sorry to cut you, was it pro-black or it was multiracial?
Oh my goodness. At the time I went to Rhodes, I would say that black people were in the minority, in the very serious minority.
Okay.
I would say 20%. Now, there was a very good, a very big international student community. And by international, I mean a lot of people from Zimbabwe and some of the Southern Africa countries. So when in that 20% was also a very big community of Zimbabweans, a lot of
Okay,
Zimbabweans.
yeah.
It was a very wide dominated varsity at the time. And I remember my first year, I would describe it as traumatic. I came from the township, didn't speak English on a daily basis, and didn't really interact with white people at all. And then I was like trust.
Culture shock.
It was a huge
Slum has
culture.
told me.
It was a huge culture shock. I
Yeah.
literally walked around varsity feeling like, where am I for the
Shame,
most part.
yeah.
But I'm a very determined person.
Yeah.
Like when the odds are against me, I am that determined little person who's like, I'm going to beat the odds.
Oksala,
And I
yeah.
do think I beat the odds
Yeah.
I did finish my 3-year degree in 4 years because of that culture shock and the jump. I think, and I would say maybe this could still be the case today. Very few people from township schools are ready for the academic jump to university first year. It's a huge, huge jump. I think academically, they just aren't ready for it. I certainly wasn't.
Yeah, I also wasn't. Another also thing is that I struggled with was coming from a small town, from
Yeah.
Mthatha, and then now you're in Johannesburg,
Yeah.
and you hear people that come from
Worldly
private
people.
schools that cost isalaries abantu,
Yes.
and the imposter syndrome also is
Yes.
like, ndilapha nabo.
Yes.
But I quickly understood that siqala ku-zero sonke ngoku, we are in
Yeah.
the same class. I don't care if you come from a private school that costs my mom's salary.
Yeah.
But I think it's destabilizing. And the English.
And the English for me,
Yeah.
it took a very, very long time. And I forced myself to speak it. And I'm embarrassed to say that I think because I was forcing myself to speak it, because I was very aware of the fact, and especially when you're in journalism and you need to speak and you need to sound articulate.
Yes.
It is that better. So I've always felt like an underdog from the days I was at Rhodes.
I like underdog.
Yeah.
Pumza, tell us a little bit about yourself, your childhood, where you're from. Tell us about what little Pumza was up to.
I grew up in a house full of boys. I was the only girl of 7 children.
You've got 6 brothers.
I've got 6 brothers.
Wow, I would have loved that.
And I was the second born. So
Okay.
you can imagine the responsibility. You know how we grow up, the responsibility
look after the
of
little
having
ones.
having to be the responsible one. And I think because I was the only girl, though, my dad and I got along great. I think my brothers say you were the favorite. I don't think I was the favorite.
So where in the Eastern Cape?
In the Eastern Cape, Mdantsane.
Oh, okay.
In fact, we started Uhlala Mdantsane when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And in those days, I mean, South Africa was a politically volatile country, but my childhood was fairly protected. My parents were very protective, and from a very, very young age, I knew that I wanted to be a journalist.
You did?
And I know that for a lot of people grow up, they go to school, they're not sure.
How did you know?
Because I loved stories.
Okay.
I loved reading stories. I loved telling stories.
Okay.
And I loved people that could tell stories. So storytelling and just shaping what people believe, and for me that was something that I was drawn to. So from that, I used to be that girl who would carry the radio around, listening to it and thinking to myself, yes, umsasaz. And I grew up saying, I actually wanted to be in broadcasting, journalism, broadcast journalism, but I ended up in print, which worked out great for me. But I always grew up knowing that I wanted to tell stories. I wanted to write. I was a very good writer from a young age, and it was quite natural for me to want to go to Rhodes and do journalism.
And do journalism. And growing up at that time, you know, we all have that person that we look like, aunties banban, umalumu banbani, that looked like success, and you would look at them and think, wow, I want to be him or her. Who was that person for you?
I don't know if I have one person in mind, I must say, because I think we moved around a little bit.
Yeah.
But the person who was my English teacher in matric, though, he inspired me.
So the talent for writing.
Yes, and you know, you get those people that are always recognizing the little talents that you have. Those people are important, eh? And I had that. For me, it was my dad. I think my dad had a lot to do with, I would say, confidence, because he always made me feel that I needed to be listened to. And my dad was ahead of his time in terms of the way that he parented.
What was he doing?
My dad they called them in those days agricultural extension officers.
Okay.
Umlimi. Umlimi. Those people. Yes. So those people that go into the rural areas and it's just make sure that in those days it was subsistence farming, but also there were a lot of government-owned commercial farms in those days. So he worked like that.
Lovely.
So my dad made me feel that I was smart and I needed to be listened to. So I tended to be quite opinionated, and he didn't mind it.
But you just answered my question. So you mentioned the teacher that saw the talent and harnessed it, and then the dad came with the confidence.
My dad. He used to actually, he would tell me that, oh, you are so smart. I am sure he just liked me. But he would tell me I'm smart.
That was my grandparents for me.
And the funny thing is that when I was in matric, I was a hard worker. I was always a very serious child, a hard worker.
You look like you were serious.
No, I was a serious child. I didn't get into trouble. I just didn't. And my mother, because I was doing maths and science, she thought that I would go into the sciences. Even though I grew up saying I wanted to do journalism. Oh, you did maths and
science?
I did maths and science.
And you did fairly well there as well?
I wouldn't say fairly well. I was just a hard worker who passed. I got decent marks.
Okay.
When I was in matric and I was applying to go to varsity, my mom was like, you are not doing journalism. Who do you know that's a journalist that's successful?
That's another thing with parents. She
was like, what is this journalism thing? Like, what is that? And my dad said to my mom, she's got a good head on her shoulders. If she thinks she's going to do journalism and she's going to make something of it, let's let her. That's how much he trusted me and trusted my ability to make good decisions for myself.
Yeah.
And a few years ago, my mom said to me, you know, you've done okay. I'm glad I did it. I'm glad you didn't listen to me. Yeah, she said, I'm glad you didn't listen to me, because she didn't get it. She didn't get what it is I wanted to do with that.
Pumza, for anyone who isn't in the journalism space, in the communication space, what would you say you do for a living?
I will describe what journalism is, was, and what it is today. and then I'll explain what I did. So when I was a journalist, of course, it's you go to a lot of press conferences, you're writing stories, you're telling the story. For me, that was about telling the South African economic story to a global audience, which was about what is it that makes South Africa a country to invest in, a country to bring your money in, and what is it that makes South Africa a country where people can thrive, the people that live here.
Yes.
And just to digress a little bit, at some point in my life, I had an opportunity to go and live in the United States. And in fact, I was in the United States during 9/11. When those planes
9/11?
hit. Yeah, I was in the US at the time.
Seriously?
Yeah, I was. And what I noticed about Americans was how they just think America is the promised land, is the place to be. And yes, it is for a number of reasons. But for me, I was a South African. And I thought, no, it isn't. South Africa is the place to be.
Have you been to South Africa?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when I came back and I became a journalist, it was just such a labor of love because I realized just how much I love my country.
So you went to the US for journalism?
No. My ex-husband, I was married at the time. I married very young.
Okay.
My husband was going to school.
Oh,
so
okay.
I went as a partner, and I was there for about 2 years. And when I came back and I was doing that for South Africa, I realized just how much I love this country. So journalism is about telling the stories. Now people either do it in print or do it through broadcasting in this way. And in those days there were no podcasts, so it was pretty simple. If you had a journalism degree, you were going to most likely get a job. And you were going to do something that you love. That has changed a lot.
Definitely.
And when people do journalism these days, I think we didn't have podcasts, we didn't have social media. And if you think about how do people consume news today, a lot of people they find out what's happening.
It's on your phone.
It's on your phone. It's from social media. It's from podcasts, and so the journalism as I knew it has changed. Which means that if people graduate with a degree in journalism, it's a little bit tougher and more challenging to do that. In terms of communications, I started my communications work in the public service at the National Treasury, which is where we met, and I loved that. But basically what you do is the same thing. If you're working for a government department, for instance, your job is to tell the story of what kind of policies is this department trying to advance. What are those policies going to change and do for South African people, and why should South African people support those policies? And it's all about also working with the department to try and the trade-offs that need to be made, because whatever it is that you're doing, there's always trade-offs, like working with the department in terms of how do we tell that story, how do we convince the people that we need to convince, but also what are the trade-offs and how do we manage that.
And also for the public to be accessible.
Because
a lot of people don't know what Treasury does. So you do need someone that bridges that gap.
And for a policy-making department such as the Treasury, it is something that is so far from a daily life of a normal South African, that they don't feel that it's about their work.
They don't think they're supposed to know.
Exactly. But when you consider that some of the things in South Africa that have happened, the economics and the decisions of government in terms of what do we spend money on, what do we, like I say, it's always a trade-off. If you spend money here, that means you don't have enough money for that. And then it's just sort of explaining that story, explaining where do we raise taxes, and how do we raise taxes, and all of those things. I found that job to be very exciting, and I think it was because of my economics reporting background from Reuters. So it was nice and interesting to me.
So you started Reuters as a journalist, and you decided at some point, I don't know, how long did you stay at Reuters?
I was at Reuters for 5 years.
5 years.
And it was more so like a natural evolution, actually, because like I say, at Reuters I was reporting on the finance minister. I was going to Parliament. When the finance
okay.
minister
Yes.
is tabling the budget, I would be one of those journalists that are writing the story. When the Reserve Bank is making decisions on interest
Yes.
rates, I would be one of those journalists that are sitting there asking him questions about interest rates and why we are cutting interest rates and all of that. When a president, for instance, is making a proclamation about our economic policy going forward, and what we
Yes.
want to do is the national development plan,
Yes.
I would be one of those journalists that are reporting on that. So
Yeah.
the change to working at the Treasury, it's funny, I knew the senior
But it's
officials.
aligned. I'm listening to you now. Like, I didn't know the type of journalism you're doing
Yes.
at Reuters, but moving from there and to starting at
Yes.
Treasury, being media relations, or it's
Yes,
still
I was media relations.
Media relations. It's aligned.
It was very much aligned. So
Yeah.
when I went to Treasury, I knew the senior officials very well because I used to interview them.
Or there's a relationship
yes,
there.
I used to interview them. I knew the finance minister already because I used to be that journalist. Like if the finance minister has got to go somewhere, I was one of those journalists who was like following him around and reporting on what he's got to say. Yeah.
Look, a lot of people also, especially if you started in a private corporate space, they tend to feel that when you take a public service job, it's going to slow you down, or you won't be as exposed as you are. Did you have those fears? And what was that transition for you?
Oh my
What
goodness.
was it like?
Look, I think the only thing about the public service for me that was a downside was, let's be honest, it's the remuneration. Otherwise, everything else was an upside. I loved serving my country in that capacity. I loved the work that I was doing. I loved being around the table when critical, important decisions about South Africa were being discussed and made. And for me, anyone who gets exposed and who works in the public service, I would say there's no better job in terms of exposure because your scope and scan of work is going to be that much wider, and it is going to be very strategic. I think I loved working in the public service, and one of the reasons for that was because I wasn't doing the same thing every day. And in fact, for me, working at Treasury was like being at varsity once again, because 1 minute I'm dealing with the how do we fund municipalities?
Yes.
How do municipalities spend their money? In fact, one of the interesting stories, things that I dealt with when I was working at the Treasury, you remember some Limpopo municipalities were under administration.
Yes.
And then just understanding the politics of that and the dynamics of
So
that.
much to learn.
Exactly. And one of the things that was an interesting story when I was working at the Treasury was when South Africa as a country its credit rating was downgraded. And I remember sitting in meetings with the minister and it's like, how do we explain this to the people? Why a credit downgrade is significant. And
So
it
that's
is
the
something.
media relations.
That's the
now.
media relations
Okay,
of Treasury.
Because when I met you, you were a head of media relations.
Yes.
And then at some point you were doing external communications.
Yes, it's sort of the same
So
thing.
there's a marriage between the two.
Yes.
Because sometimes things sound the same. So when you say strategic communications and then you say external communications, you say media relations, some people tend to think it's the same thing. But I just want you to just make it make sense a little bit.
I would say it is pretty much the same thing. So when I say strategic communications practitioner right now, it's because I work, media relations is one of the things that fall under strategic communications. Yes. One of the other things that fall under strategic communications is reputation management.
Definitely.
And reputation management is handling the hard stuff and coming up with plans and scenario planning.
When the crisis is crisising.
And it's all about, first of all, thinking very proactively. Let's say a decision is being made.
Yeah.
Thinking very proactively to advise the principals of in what way can this go wrong? And when it does go wrong, how do we explain it? And what is the credible story we can tell about this when it goes wrong? So that's part of strategic communications. Okay. Sometimes you're only dealing with the media, but sometimes you're behind the scenes and helping senior managers, senior decision makers.
And to foresee a problem and having a plan should it go a certain way.
And should it go a certain way.
Okay.
To say that, for instance, and also part of it is how do we convince the stakeholders stakeholders. And sometimes those stakeholders are not media, but it is stakeholders that need to be brought in and buy into the decision that you are making, whether you are a department like a national treasury or you are a private company. Yeah.
So taking that part that we've just discussed now, adapt that in a private sector.
Yeah.
How do you think that works? Is it more broader, or it's exactly the same process?
It is exactly the same process. But when you're working in the public service, you have got the luxury of that wide scan I was talking about.
It's the world.
It's the world. And also the level where you are operating is very, very high. Because these are people, it doesn't matter whether you're working for the transport department or you're working you are dealing with things that have a sense of national importance.
Yes.
Even if you're working, by the way, in a municipality or in a province, there are things that are of serious importance.
Yeah, we are Formula 12.
Exactly. Exactly.
The sky is falling.
Yes. When you go into the private sector, first of all, for me, what I found was that my world shrunk.
Oh, yeah.
My world shrunk.
The focus
was narrower.
Yeah, I get you.
And I missed doing a lot of things that I used to do at National Treasury. And I'll tell you, one of the things, for instance, I'll give you an example. I was exposed to a treasury when the guys that deal, for instance, with investors directly,
yes,
that was the Treasury Department of the Treasury, the ALM they called it. When they met with investors, sometimes I would be in the room. When they met with credit ratings, sometimes I would be in the room. I was invited. When I went to the private sector, that had nothing to do with me at all. My job was about looking after the media, writing the press release, and arranging the interviews and all of that. So it shrunk. So what I'm saying is that when you compare the public service with the private sector, in the private sector, my experience, and in fact it's the experience of a lot of people, you will become a specialist very quickly. And you will be very good at your job. But the scope of it will most likely be what you do, and it's quite narrow. So if you're looking at, for me, the public service was a huge benefit.
Big challenge.
Challenge, but a huge benefit.
Yeah. Let's touch on reputational management. You obviously cannot deal with national importance issue, and you don't worry about that. Let's expand on that. What's the biggest thing, that's happened in your career?
Oh my God.
Where the minister was like, Sana, vuka. The sky is falling, the crisis is crisising. I want us to take it step by step. There's an issue. Now, what is expected of Pumza? I don't know if there's like a step, you get ahead, you do this. Like, what's the best way to handle a crisis that affects an institution's reputation, even if you're looking at it from a national level or even you're looking at it from a corporate level? What is expected of you in that situation where a reputation is falling?
Yeah. Okay, so I think I've dealt with so many, and it's very difficult for me to think of one specifically right now. But I think one of the things that I dealt with it, and in government it's different because there are just so many layers. It's not straightforward, and the reason it's not straightforward is because of the politics.
Yes.
So
complicates everything.
Yes, politics are complicated a lot because a lot of decisions have got a lot of political layers on them. But one of the things that I remember I'm dealing with, I was still working in government when a minister was fired, and it was a surprise. And I remember it happened over December.
Remember, yes.
It happened over December.
Yes.
And and when it happened, I had just had a major operation, so I was not feeling well. I was sort of like on sick leave.
Yeah.
So it happened, like, I think it was a Wednesday. And the reason I know I'm going roundabout to try and answer your question. Anyway, so when that happened, I remember it was in the evening. I had my phone was in the other side of the house, and around 8 p.m. I asked my child, please go fetch my phone. And she fetches my phone and she gives it to me. As she's giving to me, it rings, and without thinking, I answer it. And the person on the line says, "Oh, Pumza, this is so-and-so from this publication. We just want to know what do you think about the firing of the minister."
No clue what
this is the first time I'm hearing this. I'm like, literally. And I'm like, I am so sorry. I I'm off sick and I just woke up and I went to the doctor today, which was true. But I mean, like I couldn't come up with I couldn't spin.
You expected to
couldn't
spin at that
spin.
moment.
I was so shocked.
But
and she said to me, "Don't worry about it. But I'll call you. Just digest it a little bit. I'm gonna call you." Now, one thing about that, when you are handling crisis and your life is about handling crisis, you always want to make sure that you build relationships with the important stakeholders. The important stakeholders can be journalists. The important stakeholders can be the PA of the people you always have to get into the diary without planning.
Yeah.
And the important stakeholders are just other people in other departments. You need to be that person that people can want to listen to, and they want to give you the time of the day. Because if they don't, they can embarrass you because they can. Now, what this journalist could have done was to write a story that says, Treasury spokesperson,
she doesn't even know what's going on.
Oblivious. And that has happened before. So part of reputation management, you build relationships with people. And I always say, people, I'm not a nice person, but I try because I always know that you never know when you're going to need a person. So part of reputation management, to do your job well, build relationships with people. And so that when you phone in the middle of the night, they are more likely to take your call. Now, one of the things that happened that week, there was a crisis we were dealing with one of the state-owned entities. And it was a matter that journalists, I mean, even the Financial Times people wanted to know how is South Africa handling this? And again, even there, you should always tell the truth, even if you couch the truth in ways that you can work with. Don't lie. Do not say something that is not true. People think that reputation management and being a spin doctor, because we were called spin doctors.
Olivia Pope.
People think that being a spin doctor is about it's not about lying. You should never lie, because the truth always comes out, and when that truth comes out, it's going to embarrass you personally, but it's going to embarrass the institution that you represent, and it is okay to sometimes say you don't know and to not answer the question if there's nothing to say.
Lower this phone.
So that is how, I mean, with some of the crises that I've dealt with, I've always found that the key to it is to make sure that when people phone and you speak to them, you're going to tell them the truth. And if you're not in a position to answer something honestly, you should tell them, I'm afraid that's not something I'm in a position to discuss.
Or talk about now.
I'm not in a position to talk about that right now, but do not lie. And also don't treat people that like, don't take things personally. Because when people are coming to you to ask you tough questions, they are doing their job. Whether they are a journalist, whether they are a member of the public, whether they are doing their job.
Maintain your composure.
Because if you take it personally, it gets under your skin, and you end up saying something rude, because like, how can you ask me that? How can you ask us that? We don't need to answer you.
It's not a good look.
Yeah, no, that's not a good look.
And you have things called war rooms. Tell me what a war room is.
A war room is where, it's really happening. Like the stuff has hit the fan, and it's all over.
Everyone meets
everyone meets in a war room, and what you're trying to do, you're wanting to make sure you are monitoring what's going on so that you don't miss anything. You are monitoring what people are saying about it, and what are the negative things that they are saying about it, and so that you can be able to respond to it very quickly. And also, one of the things that happen in a war room, you have to report to the principals, so that as they are taking decisions, you are able to say to them, based on this intelligence that we have, we can tell you that that's not going to work out very well. And also, it's about the tactics now. What do you write? What do you say? And who do you say to? Who do we speak to? If we want to convince the people of this, who are the right people to speak to? And in these days, there are people called influencers. In other days, it would be like commentators. Who are the commentators that we can speak to? Who are the people that we can pull on our side? And how do we do that in order to tell the story?
Just by mentioning that, now this is public relations pretty much as well.
It is. Yeah.
Okay.
It is.
You see, there's so many names for everything.
You see, the thing is, and I should have actually started there to say that when we say strategic communications, it's all of these things, but they're public relations,
So it's strategic
media
communications, and then
yes.
under that umbrella,
Yes.
Yes, that's
all
what I
of
wanted
these
to
things,
understand.
all of these things, they are
Okay.
strategic communications, but the terms are interrelated. Like it's people use them interchangeably.
I think what also complicates things when you try to explain it is that each of these areas, there's a targeted qualification for it.
Yeah.
So someone can go and do a BA in media relations.
Yeah.
Someone can go and do a BA in strategic
Yes.
communications.
Yes.
A degree in journalism.
Yes.
But you did journalism, but now you are dealing with all of them.
Yes.
Do you understand that?
Yes. So when in the degree in journalism at Rhodes, it included at third year level, it included a module on public relations.
Okay.
So journalism was the big thing, but public relations you needed to do. I think in those days there were already people doing degrees or qualification in public relations, but for me it was one of the minors.
But
if I were to
kodwa
put it like
awukwazi
that.
ufundela yonke into ofuneka uyifundile. Some things you learn on the job, honestly. Because now, just because you've never done media relations, now you must go qualify. It's like,
Actually, actually, one of the things I am finding is a big issue right now. Let's say, for instance, you're working for a mining firm or a pharmaceutical firm,
Yes.
and your job is to do strategic communications. In order for you to do that job well, and also to have the respect of your senior colleagues, you need to understand pharmaceuticals. And that means you need to understand the supply chains. You need to understand how the drugs are produced. You need to understand the regulations around that thing. You probably need to understand all of the intricacies and the politics around NHI. So the point I am making with that is, in order to do strategic communications well, you need to be a well-rounded, multi-skilled person. So if you are in pharmaceuticals, or if you are working for a mining firm, for instance, you've got to understand the business of mining.
Yes.
Otherwise, you won't be able to do the job.
Look, and the institutions also do. I mean, with you, Treasury, you went and you did your economics just to prepare you for the space. Yeah, because sometimes we need to remove our mindset from thinking that every single move you make requires a degree. Some things you learn as you're going.
There are a lot.
Sometimes you need to read and spend time with your colleagues so that you are on par with them, especially with something that is specialized, such as pharmaceuticals and all of that.
And I think we sometimes underestimate the idea of learning on the job.
Yes.
I am of the view that a lot of people that come from varsity don't bring the skills that they need to the job.
That prepare them to do the job.
As a person who has hired people as a manager, what I look for, I look for the right attitude and also the right attitude, and someone I feel that they have a hunger to learn. And sometimes you will not find that in somebody who brings in the distinctions and that. You will find that in somebody who's got that hunger to learn because they know. So that's what I look for, because a lot of things that you need to know anyway, you're going to learn on the job.
Yes. In fact, you're answering a question that I wanted to have in your space. What's that one characteristic that one needs to have to be able to handle this type of job? You just mentioned now hunger, right attitude. Is there anything else?
For me, it's curiosity.
Curiosity.
For me, I like people that are curious.
And ask questions.
Because people that are curious will never feel that they know. They will always want to know more. And that's where growth comes from.
True.
If you're not curious, it's very easy to fall into the trap of just being complacent. And you know, there are those people at work, let's be honest, there are those people at work that have worked there for like 16 years. They are doing the same job that they've been doing there.
Routine.
And it's routine. And they're not, and they will tell you that no, we've always done it like this.
It's always been
and for
like
me,
this.
that's not, the world changes so much that just because we always did like this, like 7 years ago, and it worked very well then, it doesn't mean it's going to work well today. So I like people that are curious. They ask questions, they're interested to learn, and they read, and they find out more. And they're also open to feedback. because
Very important.
Yeah, people that are curious are open to feedback, and because
Very
they're open to
important.
feedback, you find that you take them today, 18 months from now, you can see they've learned something.
Yes.
So for me, I like people that are curious. I'm curious myself. I love people that are curious. I don't like people that are. For me, it's not a trait that I like to see when people are just too set in their ways.
Yeah, don't be so settled.
Don't be too. Yeah,
that you're
I'm
not
also that
learning.
kind of person.
Yeah.
I'm always aware that there's so much that I don't know. So when I'm a manager, I like people that are going to tell me things I don't know. I like people that are going to challenge the way that I'm thinking. I like somebody
learn
who's
from
going to
them
say,
as well.
yeah, I like somebody who's going to say, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, I didn't think about it like
Yes.
that. Let's see, tell me more about what you think. That's what I appreciate in people.
Yeah.
Because then the decisions that are made, they are a little bit, the process that takes you there is a little bit more robust, and the decisions are more better.
Perspective is not just
a
yours.
lot of perspectives have been considered,
Yes, yes.
rather than I'm the boss and this is how it goes.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't work like that.
Pumza, you're now in the banking industry,
Yeah.
but what would you say has been like a moment for you where you just felt like, I want to lay project? I'm so proud of my work here. Here, I'm killing it. Just a project something that you've done so far in your career where you felt like you were so proud. And say, do you see me?
I have. So I think one of the things that I have liked at the place I work at was that with a lot of reputation risks that we were dealing with, I was person in the background.
Okay.
I'll tell you, there is nothing more gratifying as somebody who works in communication when your principal stands there and they read your speech. And they read what
those are my words.
And you're like,
those are my thoughts.
Like, I wrote that.
Yeah.
I made him say that. And for me, I love that. Or when you see a headline and something lands in the way that you wanted it to land, and you're like, they got it. There's just so much pride I take in that. And I mean, I have dealt with a lot of reputation risk issues where something is like, yep, it's going left. Like,
especially in the banking industry. Banking industry is always pissing people off.
Yes,
either they're not following the rules,
exactly,
or they're not meeting the public's expectations.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, and it is from that where I have had my most learnings, where I have felt with you go into something and then you realize there's just so much that you do not know. There's so much that you need to learn. And one of the things about banking, I'm not digressing, but when people complain about what we do, as banks, we can't. So let's say, for instance, a customer is not happy about how we handle their issue. They go to the journalist, and the journalist is like, yeah. And then there's Miss So and so. You guys didn't. We are.
You guys get that a lot.
We can't, as a bank, we cannot discuss a client with a third party. So I can't exactly tell you. I can't set the story straight.
Yes,
I'm not in a position to set the story straight. I can't set the story straight and tell you, no. What really happened here is...
In fact, they don't have 500,000 in their account. I'm looking at it now. They have 500 rand.
Yeah.
There is that confidentiality.
The commandment of the customer, you will always protect the customer and the information and the relationship.
True, actually.
Is paramount.
That,
so it makes things tricky, but also interesting at the time. So how do you convince somebody that you were not in the wrong, if you cannot really?
Because even if the person that's trying to complain about this particular bank, you're also now in a position to protect their privacy in terms of their banking history and
you have to protect. You have to, and that is something that I think it's one of those things. We need that integrity in the system, so that I think there was something, and you know how South Africans are always coming up with jokes. So, and it was from one of the banks, and I think that weekend there had been an issue in the bank. I think with the ATMs, and the cards were not working, which is something that happens. And somebody went on Twitter to say, "Hi man, what's wrong with you guys? I can't even use my card." And then there was an
and
answer.
tagged the bank.
Yeah, they tagged the bank. And then there was an answer, but this was a joke. Somebody replied with, stop it. It's not like you've got money. We know you broke. So stop complaining.
Yeah, ne?
A bank cannot do that. I mean, it was a joke. Somebody had made a joke of it. But I just
You can't reply like that.
Because as banks, you can't say that. We have to say, oh, sir, we are so sorry. And you have nothing.
Look, just by that alone, I've seen how active, and the banks they start sounding like it's a person. They say, oh, Pumza, I see that you're saying your card is not. I think the communication is evolving. I just want to just hear your point of view in terms of how everything is going now, media relations, journalism, from when it was back then to how it is now. I know we touched on it. Just how quickly things are addressed, how people feel when something is wrong. It's just 1 minute. I even put it on, and the story could be wrong, could be right, but it's out there. Like in your way, have you caught up? And how are you catching up? And
I mean, let me just for disclosure, I don't work in communications anymore in the bank.
Okay.
But I did work there for quite a long time.
Okay.
I think what is one of the things that are challenging for all brands right now, whether it's in FMCG or whether it's in banking or whether it is the fact that people have a voice and it is instantaneous. And also it can go viral very quickly if you're not aware. And now reputation management comes when it's proactive. It is to make sure that a customer and a stakeholder never gets to that point where they are so disillusioned that they feel that their only choice is to go out to the media.
Got you.
That's the best way to handle it. You need to have a relationship with the customer where they feel that the service is great, and when it isn't, they are listened to, and the mechanisms for them to complain and to bring their issue and it be resolved, they are working. When those things aren't in place, then you find that the customer...
First point of call is social media,
yes,
instead of calling customer care.
Then the customer is going to go and climb on the rooftops and then blast you. And you always want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So our jobs, you find that people that are working in communication, you have to work very, very closely with the customer. So you
need someone on the ground all the time, monitoring those type of things, because they happen like this quickly, every second, every minute.
I mean, every important brand, they have that social media person who is monitoring, and the media and the report goes out on a daily basis to say that this is how we were mentioned in the social media, and this is how far it reached. It is an issue we need to continue monitoring. We feel that pressure has abated, so we can move on. So there's somebody who's always monitoring that. And for me, when I was doing that job, I had no experience in social media, in digital media, because I mean, in 90-something, when I got my degree, that was not a thing.
In the 90s, somewhere.
In the 90s, that was not a thing.
It wasn't.
Which is why then you get the young people who understand it, and you listen to them. And also you have the humility of understanding that you actually don't really understand how some of these things work, and you need to listen to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's technology after technology after technology. I mean, Pumza, your kids are they aware what you do? Would you even encourage anyone to go this route?
I think, in fact, I had a young person ask me about journalism, and I said that journalism has changed so much that I would say if you want to find yourself in journalism, now I will say the nice thing about it is that it's a very versatile field.
It is.
You will find a journalist who is a motor journalist, or a journalist whose job is a travel journalist, and all they do is travel and hospitality, and that's nice. You will find a journalist who's reporting on tech, and they tend to be experts in their field.
Yes.
So I would say decide what it is that you want to be a journalist of.
And merge it with the profession. And
make sure that you marry them, because we're never gonna get rid of people that want to tell stories. But unfortunately, we now have AI, and people think that they can just go and ask what is it called?
You know what? I'm gonna ask you a very honest answer. I don't know what AI is for. Do you know? I haven't had the time to, but I know it exists. I don't know what it is.
I mean, right now, the one I'm mentioning is where you can just ask it. You can say to it, write an email saying this, and it spews it out.
Okay.
That's what
it can even write the email for you.
It can write the email for you. It can write the essay for you. It can write. So that functionality exists. Okay. So people think that those things are going to replace people that do journalism. I think I do not know if they will completely replace them because they are still working on advancing those kind of technologies to be able to understand nuance, because right now they don't understand nuance. They will spew data but without understanding nuance. So it's I would say to somebody who wants to do journalism that it's a very, very tough field. There is AI, there is podcast, there is all of these things that have changed the face of journalism. And we see it in how media companies, their profitability is under pressure. Newspapers, they used to be places where people want to work. Newspapers
they've closed down.
Consistently closing down and are having to reinvent themselves. So things have changed a lot.
Too much.
Yeah.
Too much. I'm just from listening to you. You've done a lot of work. Are you interested? Maybe I think what's missing is you working for a broadcaster or television.
Is this something? Not at my age.
Are you still thinking of ways to? How can I go bigger?
I don't know if I'm thinking of ways of how can I go bigger. But in my younger years, I did want to work in broadcasting. And my job sort of got me to do that as a spokesperson of National Treasury. I mean, I was appearing.
Oh, you get on the news,
being interviewed.
Well.
That was the little. Those were the small things that I was doing. But no, right now I work for a bank, and it links to the point I was making. You need to know your industry. So right now I'm studying. I'm studying finance, and my goodness, it is so hard. It really, really is hard because my brain has been a humanities brain for the longest time. But I find myself now doing a qualification in finance because I feel that growth is also about evolving as a person. And I've evolved in a lot of ways. And I would like to do something a little bit more commercial within the banking industry, but my love will always be in strategic communications, telling stories for the bank and helping them to slay the dragons that they need to slay.
Slay the dragons. Do you feel that now where you are in your current position, where you are as a chief of staff, does it not put you now in a position where you need to tell people what to do and you need to take the back? It's exactly what you're saying. You're taking the back seat.
It's more taking the back seat.
Yes.
Because I work in a chairman's office. I do not work in an executive for an executive.
Yes.
So I don't get involved in a whole lot of day-to-day stuff that needs.
What does a chief of staff do?
So I work for a chairman. And it's a very ill-defined role, and what it ends up being is always up to the principal and the person. But basically, a lot of what I do is to just make sure that his time is spent efficiently, so that he's got the time to do the things that he needs to do. Some of the things that come to him, he doesn't need to look at. I can take care of, so I will take care of those things and make sure. Because think about it, when somebody is a CEO or a big person, they're inundated with a lot of things that come to them. So how they spend their time is a very important decision. It's like, okay, fine, you spend time here, I'll take care of this.
So you focus on him and everyone around him? Just him?
Mostly him. When he travels, when he's got to be prepared for things that he needs to be prepared for in his interactions with external stakeholders, that's my job.
Was there a moment that you missed or something you wish you could have done that you think if I had taken that opportunity or did this, it would have elevated or changed my direction? You know, when you think back and you're like, hey, I had this offer. I wish I had taken it because it would have changed. You have that moment with yourself and you think...
Actually, before I joined the Treasury, Reuters was speaking to me about going to work in Washington, and I didn't take the opportunity. And in fact, I don't regret that. But I will tell you, the one thing that I wish I had done differently in my career was not to be so fearful. Fearful, like holding yourself back because you are worried about you can do well. I can't do this very well. I can't do that. And that's why I'm so proud of you for this, because
Thank you.
I think we hold ourselves back. At some point in my life, I wanted to write a book. I haven't done that. Now I can kick myself for not doing that. At some point in my life, I thought I could use the weekends to do something like this, not necessarily a podcast, because there were no podcasts in those days, but on radio.
Focus on your other interests.
Focus on my other interests, and I didn't do that. I think for me, the one thing that I look back in my career and I wish I could do differently is just not to be so fearful. Put myself out there and worry less about, oh my goodness, I'm going to look like a palooza.
Well, you're fearless now. You still have time to write that book.
Thank you for saying that, because I think I'm very inspired by this. I'm really seriously that you're doing this. I'm like, my goodness.
Thank you. It's a long conversation that you need to have with yourself.
Yeah, I wish I had not been so fearful. I wished I had stepped up and shown up for myself,
for yourself,
and some of the growth I could have had. Yeah, but I think I have enjoyed every step of my career. I've had amazing opportunities. Like I was saying, I've been to China to cover the Olympics. I was there for 3 weeks. I was there for 3 weeks, and I was like, my goodness, the world is a very big place. I've sat in meetings where I'm pinching myself because, oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm with this world leader around. I'm sitting around the table with this
I hope you are not doing this, taking a photo with the world leader.
Do you know that I can't, I still cannot do that, because a big part of me always feels that I've got to be the professional one.
Yes.
The downside of it though is that a lot of what I'm telling you, I don't have evidence of it because I never took pictures. Something else I regret. Yeah, something else I regret. Because I always felt that...
You can't do that. You're in a very private space.
Yes, I always felt that I've got to be the serious girl. I can't be like, Sissy, come. Let's take a picture.
You can't.
But I've had an amazing career. And my children always make me feel like, oh my, I can't believe you did that. Oh my, I can't believe you did that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've had an amazing career.
I'm so happy you came.
Thank you.
I think with you, I knew that we would touch on a lot of the umbrella and what is under the umbrella. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, Tidi, thank you so much.
Please, let's be in touch. We lost touch, but when I knew that I needed to speak to someone, I will never forget you. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
Guys, that's it. It's a wrap. Thank you so much again. We'll be coming back soon with episode 10. Please do give us more of your comments and your recommendations. Don't forget to subscribe. Let's grow the podcast, and we'll see each other soon. It's a wrap. That's it.